Well, welcome everybody to the Gary Neville Podcast on a beautiful sunny day in Manchester, but off the back of a Manchester derby, which, in truth, amongst many of the great games between United and City, won't last long in the memory.
No.
What have you made of it?
I thought it was a really poor game. I think, look, there's two or three things I could say that maybe it's symptomatic of the fact that maybe there's a feeling that everyone's experiencing, that the league's done, the relegation's sorted. Maybe there's a feeling at the end of the season there's not a lot to play for, but for City, they're obviously going for Champions League, and for Manchester United, their manager is trying to establish a system and a style of play and a relationship, obviously, with his players, and also prepare for a big European game in midweek. So that's probably that. But I think symptomatic of both teams and where they're at. But then there's also a sort of bigger point of just this robotic element that we're seeing it's flooding in over this last sort of year or two. And I think it's an element of, one of the greatest managers of all time, Pep Guardiola's style of play, infiltrating everybody else over the last 10 years. But then what we're seeing is almost like a sort of poor man's adaptation of it. City are obviously in a difficult moment compared to where they've been in the last few years, so they haven't got the quality of player out on the pitch to implement Pep's style. There's no David Silva, Aguero's out there, and players that we've seen in the past. But I just think on that final point, I know it's very basic to say go and win the game with 20 minutes to go. That's an instruction a manager would give a group of players, which gives them some freedom. Where's the freedom in that football match? There's none. And I can't accept that. I'm getting really angry with it, because when I say these players, these are fantastic players, by the way, but they're frightened to death to move out of their positions or do anything that might just cost them a mistake that costs them the game. So what we saw at the end of the game there was a group of players congratulating each other, smiling with each other, the managers smiling with each other, and United almost did a lap of honour. Understandably, they kept a clean sheet. That's something to be proud of, and United aren't in a great moment. But the reality is, where was the disappointment and anger that they didn't win the game? Great sides and big personalities and characters feel disappointed when they've played like that and it's been an insipid game and they haven't won. And I think actually Bruno stands out from that, because I do think he was actually the best player on the pitch. I do think that he was someone who, to be fair, had real quality when he got the ball, but he was one amongst very few in the whole game. And I even include City's players. And look, out there on the pitch was Phil Foden, Kevin De Bruyne, one of the greatest players we've seen in the Premier League. But I was really disappointed with that game, with the intent to try and win. And we talk about the Premier League and what it is, and some fantastic football, electric atmospheres, brilliant football, but we've just got to be careful. We've got to be careful that with analysis, with sports science, with adaptations in coaching methods, that we take away the actual freedom of football players, that kid in the playground element of the centre-back running forward, the full-back being in a centre-forward position, throwing five into the box and the kitchen sink at the end of a game to try and win, that desperation to basically win at all costs, because that is the Premier League, that is English football, getting the ball forward into players' feet as quickly as possible. Where was the one-on-ones today? I mean, yeah, there was the odd one-on-one. Garnacho, I think, had the odd chance of one-on-one, maybe Doku did. But seriously, in a game like that, when you've got packed defences, which is not unusual, by the way, for Manchester City to face that, or even United over the years, you would have players who think, right, OK, it's a one-on-one game. It's a game whereby I've got to try and unlock the door by showing some individual brilliance. But they haven't even got the guts to do that anymore, because they're frightened to death of giving the ball away, so they recycle it back through their full-back or the midfield player. And we're seeing far too much of it. And look, maybe I'm just getting frustrated at the end of a drab game, at the end of a season whereby this game isn't the most important derby in the world, and these two clubs at this moment are not having the greatest of seasons. So maybe there's an element of that, but it's creeping in, and the centre-backs rolling the foot on the ball, and goalkeepers standing on the ball, rolling the foot on the ball, waiting for someone to come to them. And I'm not having it. It's a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. Yeah, I watched Barcelona do it to Manchester United in the 2009 Rome final, and it was something very special. And we watched Barcelona do it for 3 or 4 years after that. We've watched Manchester City, I think, when Pep Guardiola lost in his first season when he came to England. Then the year after, he had a very diminutive front six that I never thought I could see win the Premier League, which was Sané, Sterling, Aguero, and then it was David Silva, De Bruyne and Fernandinho in midfield, all quite small players relatively to the Premier League sort of powerhouses that you saw. And it was exceptional to watch the beauty of the football and the speed of the play and the excitement. And Pep's sort of what would be methodical way of playing that system and wearing teams out. But now what we've seen is that Pep's style, which he's always had, is being adapted by other teams, but in a very average manner, and it's a poor imitation of it. United are quite sort of set in their system and how they play in this sort of 3-4-3, 5-4-1 today for most of it. So, yeah, I just feel a little bit annoyed tonight, because I think that when you've got 75,000 people in a stadium, some of which will be coming to Old Trafford for the first time today, watching their first Manchester derby, some of them kids, that's not representative of what any of us like. It's not representative of what those players are capable of. And we just got to make sure that we don't allow this to creep in.
Do you forgive United to the extent that they very obviously are at this stage of the season, never mind Europe, kind of marking time? And so to get through a Manchester derby intact might feel okay. That's the requirement today, just to get through intact, move on to Thursday, and that's that. And indeed, to get through to the end of the season intact and respectably.
There is an element of that. There is an element of that, Peter. But the problem is, we've seen it before. We've had the sort of what would be the promise of derby wins, of stout, solid, rigid performances against good teams where we've won on the counter-attack. United have done that under Ten Hag. They've done it under Ole. They've done it under Jose. They've done it under... they've done it under these men. We've seen this before. So what you've got is a manager at this moment in time trying to build a foundation, and I've got a lot of sympathy with him because he hasn't got the players that he wants to play this system that he's playing. So what he's doing is retreating in big games. So he gets results against City twice this season. He's got a result against Liverpool. He's got a result against Arsenal in the Cup and Arsenal in the league. So he's had some decent results in big games. But the problem is with that, we've seen this before at United, whereby we think this doesn't lead to better things. It doesn't. You know, what United have got to do is almost lose badly playing the way that will get them back to the very top. Now, I can see why Ruben Amorim at this moment in time has gone 5-4-1 today, because he doesn't want to get a bit of a doing at home before a big game in midweek. But next season, I think that Ruben Amorim's personality is really positive. He's got real energy. He wants to play a certain way. He's just got to make sure he doesn't fall into the trap of becoming a manager who comes in, wants to play in progressive high-press football and real high energy, to thinking, well, the best way to play is on the counter-attack, because that's where Eric ended up, it's where Ole ended up, it's where Jose ended up, it's where they all ended up. The only manager that in the last 12 years here since Sir Alex left that's been able to dominate the play in the final third against big teams is Louis van Gaal. He's the only man, he really did in some big games. So, yeah, I just think we've just got to be cautious of that. But I can understand, look, the mentality of the dressing room at this moment in time. They're getting some players back from injury. He's trying to build a rapport with them and build a sort of what would be a collection of results that gives them a more positive end to the season. And the Europa League is so important. So I get it. I get it. But it doesn't stop the wider sort of thing. Doesn't lead to anything. This doesn't lead to anything. It doesn't lead to trophies. This isn't the way back. This is not progression. This is just a stepping stone to get to the next step that gets you to the next game. That might mean you get a trophy this season, which means then obviously something can be built. But yeah, it's not a long-term plan. And for Pep Guardiola, at the end of the game, I suspect he's watching his team. And look, they were giving their all, don't get me wrong, but I bet he's watching them and thinking, how did we get to this, where we're sort of so lacking in innovation and sort of creativity and different things. And I know obviously it's been a difficult season for them and they've been the most exceptional side, and I've no doubt he'll get them back to the top because that's what he does. But he'll be watching them and thinking, I don't like this either. So yeah, it was a really challenging game to watch that today.
You like Marmoush, didn't you?
Yeah, I like Marmoush. I think Marmoush makes runs without the ball, which again is an unusual thing in football. I think we see a lot of players waiting for the ball, receiving it, and then they might do something with it. But you see very few players making real direct runs in behind defenders, in between defenders. And I think he's good, and I think he actually did quite well. He wasn't given great service today, but I think he looks like he's a good player and could form part of a very good front two or front three, depending on what Pep Guardiola does next season.
I want to ask you about your predictions for the summer from City and United's perspective in a second, but before we do, I think it's only right that you, like everybody else, have your say on Kevin De Bruyne as he begins his farewell tour.
Honestly, I mean, obviously he plays for the wrong side of the city, but I think every time I've watched him for the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, I've never seen anything other than brilliant football from him. He's such a beautiful football player, amazing to watch. The quality, the precision, and the players that sort of, when people say, is he in your top midfield players in Premier League history? Of course, without a shadow of a doubt, he's one of the very best. But you don't put him in the same category as Keane or as Vieira, because he's not that same type of player. He's just not. He's different. Or I'm trying to think of other players like Rodri. He's not. He's very different. He's more like a Beckham stroke Gerrard, whereby they're not a number 10, they're not a true central midfield player, they're not a wide right, but they play in that right sort of pocket and channel. And his delivery, his quality, his understanding of the game, his intelligence, it's the precision that just for me is exceptional. And I obviously played with David Beckham and saw his passing and his crossing week in, week out, and you can't take for granted how difficult that is to do. And Kevin De Bruyne, for me, is one of the greatest Premier League football players. He's the best Manchester City player that we've ever seen. Manchester City have won trebles, they've won multiple leagues under one of the greatest managers of all time, and he's lived in that environment. So yeah, it's a big loss for the Premier League. It's a big loss for City. But it's been coming, hasn't it, for the last 7 or 8 months, sort of on and off the pitch. You just felt like it hasn't been right, either in his performances, his injuries, or even something just else. It's felt a little bit niggly. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that it's ending, but also, what a player. What a player, an absolutely wonderful player.
So we move into the post-KDB era for City. It is going to be a really fascinating summer. Just, look into your crystal ball. What do you see from City and indeed United's point of view? How do you see the summer going?
I mean, look, for City first, they've got that World Club Championship, but even before that, City can still have, not by their standards, but they can still have a good season. And that's when you're a great manager and you're a good set of players. When you can win an FA Cup, now they've got obviously they've got Nottingham Forest, who are a challenging team, and they're going to have more of that they face today, actually, in terms of resolute defending to get past. But if they could win the FA Cup and get into the Champions League, that would be a fantastic season in what's been a major drop-off for them in terms of their sort of standard of play. So, look, and then they've got the World Club Championships, which, again, is a trophy now that's got a huge prize money associated with it, which will help the club in terms of everything that they do. They've obviously got the court case coming up, which, whenever that's going to be sort of dealt with, but that will have an impact on them. It's hanging over them like a sort of black cloud. So that needs dealing with. So you've got some big moments coming up, City. But the big thing is obviously that Begirisstein's leaving, Viana's coming in, and that means that they've got a new sporting director. Pep Guardiola's going to stay, which I think is really good for them, because I'm glad he's staying, because I think if he'd have left now, there would have been an element of sort of leaving them on a little bit of not a low, but a lower than they've been. The fact that he's rebuilding with them, I think, is exciting. And look, this is when you watch City now, you think, it's just surprising. You're like, this can't be a Pep Guardiola side. So the interesting thing now is how he rebuilds it, and how he rebuilds this Manchester City team into being title winners again, and how quickly he can do that.
And United?
For United, it's about getting to the end of the season. If they can win, again, there's a lot to play for. The league, obviously, they're in 13th position, so that's it's been a waste of time, the league this season. So they've got to try and do as well as they can in that, obviously, because you've still got games to play where there's full houses every single week where they go. But the Europa League's huge. Lyon in midweek and then the week after. If they can somehow, if they could win the Europa League, United, and get into the Champions League, I would like, wow, what's going on? So that would be a sort of get out of jail free card, that one. Because financially, finishing in 13th, not being in Europe, is devastating from a point of view of we know where United's finances are. And the big impact, or the person who has that most impact on, is Ruben Amorim, because he doesn't then get the money to be able to reinvest in the squad into this system, which is a specialist system where he needs players who are quite unique. Wing-backs, they're not 10 a penny. They're not. To get the same energy system from a winger and a full-back, and defensive qualities and attacking qualities, is just tough. Those two positions in behind the striker are really tough to find, those types of quality of players. And then the striker themselves has got to be special, and those ones that United have got already aren't. So there's a lot of work to do. Maybe the defenders they can get away with in terms of the three. Maybe midfield with Mainu, with Mount, with Fernandes, and maybe Agati might get them through a season. But I think the front three and the wing backs, they need to change. they need to change. Now there might be one or two, Amad Diallo might be able to suit in that position or whatever, but I think there's 5 players there that need to be bought that are high quality to make Ruben Amorim a success here, because if he doesn't get 2 real high quality wing backs and 2 players in behind the front player and the front player of really high quality, I don't think he's going to succeed at United. He needs to get that sorted, and that's going to need some serious money. So that's the main thing about United winning the Europa League, to furnish the manager with some cash that he needs.
And of course, quite amusingly, they'll be saying exactly the same thing at Tottenham.
Yeah,
and if we have a Tottenham Manchester United Europa League final as a Champions League playoff, that'll be quite something. But that's way down the line.
The dog and duck against the Red Lion in the Europa League final. I once said that's a joke from 7 or 8 years ago when United and Liverpool were going through a bad time. So don't get too upset.
Okay, so let's go to Liverpool, who lost. Fulham always seem to be a spanner in their works, don't they? And Arsenal having dropped points yesterday. So how are you reading all of that?
It just looked like a team to me that knew that they'd won the league by winning on Wednesday against Everton at home in a big game, and then obviously Arsenal not winning yesterday. I think almost like we can afford to make a mistake here. And life just has a habit, when you take a breath and go, we're nearly there, it just gives you a little punch and a little dig, and I think that's what Liverpool have had. So it's not unsurprising that Liverpool have gone down there today and they've just sort of stepped off a little bit of a celebration probably type day, in the sense that they know they've won the league. They can make mistakes. Now what they're going to make sure is that they don't make it scruffy for the next few weeks. They will get over the line. There's no way that anyone's going to catch them, and they deserve the league title. But that will be, I think, a message from Arne Slot in the dressing room after the game will be, lads, seriously, don't mess this up to an extent that you basically win by 5 points in the end. Everyone thinks it was close. When you look back, it's not been close. So go and win it by 12, 13, 14 points. Go and keep your consistency and your performance levels high, because you don't want to sort of finish the season with a bit of a lull. Obviously, there was a little bit of a lull a few weeks ago when they got knocked out of Europe and lost the Carabao Cup. But now it can be a really fantastic end to the season and win the league early, because next season other teams are going to come back at you and you're going to have it a little bit more difficult. And you're trying to win 2 on the bounce. It's there for the taking. Manchester City, you watch them today, you watch United, you look at Arsenal yesterday in that game against Everton. Liverpool signed 2 or 3 players. If they can keep Salah and Van Dijk, 2 out of the 3, it looks like Trent's going to Real Madrid, and add 2 or 3 really good players to their first 11, they could go and win it again. So that's what they're sort of building in their minds now. Yeah, finish this job, do this, win this league, but go and make sure that we send everybody a message for next season about what we're going to do next season. So yeah, that was my thing with Liverpool today. It was a bit of a nothing day. Just all, if you think about a Super Sunday, it wasn't a Super Sunday today, was it? Because you think about, great for Fulham, well done to them, but it wasn't. The league title winners elect played really poorly, and we've seen a really poor game here. It'd be interesting to see what's Pep Guardiola saying here. Oh, we're not seeing him. Roy speaking.
So, Arsenal at Everton. Did you see the game at Everton?
I watched the second half. No, I watched the end of the first half, start of the second.
I thought it was really interesting that he essentially, I think, finished with the team that most of us would expect to start against Real Madrid, Saka and so on coming on at half-time, and gradually through the second half it became almost the first 11. How do you read Arteta's management of what is still theoretically a title chase, but obviously in very real terms a tilt at the Champions League?
Yeah, I mean, he's got a single focus, hasn't he, now, because they're too far off Liverpool in the league, and he knows that. He's got this massive tie against Real Madrid, and these are games and ties that define you as a manager. Because look, if Arsenal could beat Real Madrid, they would really fancy their chances. But you do fancy Real Madrid, don't you? You can't not fancy Real Madrid in the Champions League. But can Arsenal do something? Can Arsenal beat Real Madrid? And Arteta knows the significance of these types of nights on his managerial career and his coaching career, because they do define you. So yeah, it's a massive couple of weeks, big couple of weeks for Tottenham, big couple of weeks for Arsenal, big couple of weeks for United. So there, the European competition, the main thing as well is obviously that we can get 5 teams into Europe again next season in the Champions League. I think if we win one more game in Europe, so
we will.
Yeah, there's a lot more to play for.
Yeah, there is, and then you talk about transfers. We can't go there now, but there are only so many great players to go round to change Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, and they all won them, and it's going to be it's going to be worth watching, I think.
Yeah, and they've all spent lots of money in their transfer, in their sort of recruitment departments, analysts, scouts. They've all got 20, 30, 40 of these people looking and hovering over every single player. So it's more difficult to unearth a player now than maybe it was 25, 30 years ago. Video, I think, has made it so different. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the summer, but it's the age-old thing. Whoever recruits best will end up with the best team. But the coach is critical. But if you recruit best with a great coach, then you've got a real chance.
So that'll keep us interested through the summer. But for now,
it will.
Off the back of nothing at Old Trafford, thank you, Gary.
Nothing. Thanks, Peter. It was a nothing day.